Hi there, welcome. This is the Philanthropic Planner program, and I'd like to welcome you if you're a first-timer, and if you've seen us before, you kind of have an idea of what this gig's all about. The Philanthropic Planner is designed for you and me as philanthropists or wannabe philanthropists, and some of the professional advisors, nonprofit professionals, and so on. Philanthropic Planner applied to several different groups of people. We've been doing this program for quite some time, and the reason for that is we believe that talking about philanthropy, having a friendly forum that we can discuss this crazy, boring, not frequently talked about area of philanthropy and the importance of philanthropy to the community, to the state, the country, the nation, and globally. There are a lot of ways of being a philanthropist. You can be a volunteer, and that's very, very important to devote your time to an effort or mission that's important to you. That adds a great deal of significance to the nonprofit's efforts. So a philanthropist can be a dedicated, committed volunteer, and we encourage volunteerism as much as anything else. One of the things we like to do is share with you what other people are doing and the joy, the satisfaction, the happiness that they get out of being a giver, giving back to the community, giving back some of their benefits that they've derived, some of their excess capital, their ability to give. We don't get into the legalese. We'd like to keep this simple, but we do need to talk more about philanthropy and the importance to the community. I start off usually, and once in a while I forget to bring it, but this is the current issue of the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and we talk about what's going on in the world of philanthropy in this particular issue, and I mentioned this our last program. And by the way, the crystal ball, we did get some feedback on the last program on the crystal ball, and I mentioned that the Chronicle was coming out along with Forbes and Fortune magazine, the Chronicle, talking about the biggest donors in 2012, and this particular issue actually identifies the top 50 donors in 2012. You would suspect that people like Warren Buffett would be near the top or the top of the list, and in fact he was in 2012. Absent in this particular survey was Bill and Melinda Gates and Bloomberg and some others, and the reason for them not being included in this top 50 was that what they gave last year was a part of a pledge that they had made in previous years. Bill and Melinda Gates, for example, made a commitment, in fact with Buffett, but in 2004 or 2005. So the 300 million or 400 million contributed in 2012 was actually a part of that pledge. But young people new on the list. Zuckerberg, I think Mark Zuckerberg's only 28 or something like that, and he and his wife gifted 300 or 400 million, and some significant gifting, obviously. Now, the total of the 50 top donors last year, the total was about $7.5 billion. That's with a B. The median gift of this group, the 7.5 billion, the median gift was about 46, 47 million thereabouts. Now, that's significant, certainly, but what we look at is the difference between 2012 and 2011, and the median of that top 50 group in 2011 was like 79 million. So looking at the 46 million figure versus 79, we have a lot of people that are trying to analyze the impact, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but are we seeing difference in trends, gifting? What are the influences that might be a part of that trend? Is it the economy? Well, certainly the stock market and things were certainly better in 2011, good in 2012, but not as much as 2011. So what's the impact of the market? What's the impact of taxes, the threat of newer and bigger taxes? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I did want to start off with the philanthropy, and this program's title is, of all things, Lollipops and Rainbows. Karen asked me if I had a prop. Sometimes I have props. Most of the times I have props, and the one time that I didn't recently, I had to start off by sleeping at the beginning and the end. But Lollipops and Rainbows happens to be the title of this program, and the subtitle is Philanthropy's Future. So how did we get into Lollipops and Rainbows? A recent Saturday I had 3 or 4 business appointments, so I'm in the car driving to Brookfield and Danbury and Ridgefield and Brewster, New York. So going to those appointments and coming back, I'm listening on the radio, and something caught my ear, and it was a talk show, and you'll guess part of the getting my attention was it was a money or an investment talk show, and here's this woman caller into the talk show, wanting to know how she could establish a donor-advised fund. Whew. Bob's ears goes up. Money, investment, the capacity to give, and a donor-advised fund of all things, a vehicle that we talk about. She wanted to know how to set up this donor-advised fund, and it was, she explained that it was the result of the recent death of her grandfather, and at his wake, they had some memorabilia and artifacts remembering grandfather, and a part of that were lollipops and, of all things, rainbows. Now, I guess from that radio show, I could have said lollipops and roses, but a lot of you would not remember Jack Jones back in the 60s. Even Karen wouldn't remember Jack Jones, but I think he was the one that first recorded Lollipops and Roses, and then we had Herb Alpert, I think, with Tijuana Brass, and later, I think in the 90s, Natalie Cole did Lollipop and Roses. But this is Lollipop and Rainbows. And it seems that this caller's grandfather, his signature, I guess, was he always looked at good and said, and he always was giving out lollipops. He'd give lollipops as a surprise to kids. He'd be in a bank and give the teller. Now, we can get suckers and lollipops from the bank now, from the teller, but he was giving lollipops to the bank teller, to the grocery store clerk. The grandfather was almost known as Mr. Lollipop Guy, and it put a smile on people's face. Now, you know, the rainbow, she described pictures in grandfather's house, replicas, reprints, and kind of things of rainbows. And you and I think you would agree with me that rainbows are one of nature's most beautiful effects. When you see a rainbow, you kind of stop and pause. You get the combination of a mist or a light rain, raindrops, and the refraction of light. If the sun is behind you, You get sun and the raindrops and the mist, and you have the glorious effect of rainbows. So this caller, Rainbows and or Lollipops and Rainbows, she wanted to start a donor-advised fund. And she wanted scholarships. And she said she didn't have a lot of money, but she wanted to focus her annual giving to 10 scholarships. And she thought $1,000 each, $10,000, and if she could have people happy. And the idea with her alma mater was that when the scholarship was awarded, that it be labeled Lollipops and Rainbows in her grandfather's name. So I went to Brewster on the last leg, had my appointment there on a business appointment with a new client, and driving back, wouldn't you know, I get the rerun of this same caller, the same talk show host, and it kind of blew me away, because what are the chances on a late Saturday afternoon of hearing the show twice? But that's how we came up with Lollipops and Rainbows. If I can kind of change pace here a little bit and talk about something else, we have a number of things happening in the region, and one of those is yesterday I received an invitation for a program in Boston held yesterday. I was not able to attend, but a program put on by the Boston Foundation. Let me give you a quick background. You've heard the name Paul Shervish and the name John Havens. Back in the late 90s, I believe, 10, 12, 13 years ago, Paul Shervish and John Havens had a release of a report, a survey that they have done, widely publicized, their report on the intergenerational wealth transfer that they projected. Now, Paul and John are with Boston College and the Center of Wealth and Philanthropy. And Shervish and Havens are well known in the nonprofit area. And I can say that Paul Shervish is a friend. But this projection of intergenerational wealth in the late 90s, recall, was before the recession in 2001. And they came out with another survey, also by Boston Foundation, but it was more focused on metropolitan Boston. And Shervish at that time had this paper and a presentation on the golden age of philanthropy. Now, that was in 2006. Now they're doing another projection of the intergenerational wealth transfer, but the focus at that time in that report was on Boston metropolitan area. Well, the program yesterday that was put on, also by the Boston Foundation, was an update and talking again about the recession, meaning 2008, 2009, and the impact on philanthropy in the metropolitan area of Boston. So I found that interesting. It caught my eye, and I thought if we look at history and how the chronological running of that is, there is a deep concern in the nonprofit sector of the future of philanthropy. So my subtitle of Lollipops and Rainbows is Philanthropy's Future. Maybe I should put a question mark after Philanthropy's Future. I'd like to again go to another area this time next week, and you get a little scoop here because the Plan Giving Group of Connecticut has a program, a panel, advisors, attorney, trust officer, consultants and a representative from a large university. And their focus is on working with business owners. Now, recall the baby boomer wave. We have 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. That's mind-boggling. Many of those 10,000 baby boomers are business owners. And in their efforts to retire and have business succession, and many of them selling their business to third parties, the nonprofit area is looking at saying, if there are 10 million businesses owned by baby boomers, and 2.5 to 3 million of those are in small businesses, maybe 5, 10, 100 employees, and where is this intergenerational wealth? How is it going to be distributed, and so on? So this comes to mind, this panel, and we're going to be talking about that with the Connecticut Plan Giving Group. The other subject that I thought that I might throw into the discussion as a panel member at the Connecticut Plan Giving Group is one of Glassboro. Glassboro Normal School was founded back in 1923, 90 years ago. Southern New Jersey, normal school, started with 230 women students, one building at Glassboro Normal School, teaching, educating future teachers, and a development officer makes a call on a businessman in the early 90s seeking a cash gift. There was a campaign for Glassboro College or University. And in the conversation with this business owner, owned a machine shop, very successful. And the development officer later shared the pre-appointment work that they were doing and research, and soliciting cash for this campaign, and shared that they would like to ask for $1,000 from this business owner. And they would be tickled, just thrilled, if they could just increase that $1,000 goal to $5,000. So the development officer goes out. This was preceded by some phone calls, obviously, and leading up to the appointment. And that 1,000 as being a goal, but 5,000 would be terrific. And the business owner, Henry Rowan, said, well, I was thinking about more than that, more than the 5,000. And the development officer was kind of taken back by that. Well, the bottom line of this story is that Henry Rowan and his wife Betty ended up giving to Glassboro over $105 million. This in 1992, the board of directors of Glassboro changed the name of Glassboro University to Rowan University of New Jersey. Now, I ask when I hear this story, and it's repeated not as frequently as it was in the late 90s, but I always ask myself, what was the motivation of Henry and Betty Rowan to forget about the 1,000 or 5,000? What was the motivation to give a great deal of their wealth, maybe all of their wealth, I don't know, but $105 million? What motivated them to do that? Well, anybody in the business or related, affiliated areas always say there has to be charitable intent. Certainly there was charitable intent for Henry and Betty Rowan. But what was it beyond that? Was it tax? Was it the tax deduction? Was it gaming the system? And I suggest to you that no, it wasn't. And we found out later, certainly from looking at the Rowans, that it goes back in my mind to, and I've talked about an ad that Sage had a number of years ago. Charity begins at home. Home is where the heart is, and the heart is the community. And I don't know if I was smart enough to have that ad that we had in a national magazine publication. But home is where it begins, or charity begins at home. Now, finding out a little bit more about the Rowans is that they were deeply, deeply involved in Glassboro. Small community. The census in 1990 was that Glassboro, the borough, had about 15,000 people. Now remember, Glassboro normal schools started off with 230 students. Today, Rowan University of New Jersey has over 10,000 students, 31 different degrees, master's degrees, a doctorate effort. And you think about the Rowans involved in the community, they wanted, because of their success, to benefit the community in the future. So I look at that and I say, you know, what is the connection of the Lollipops and Rainbows, the connection of people that study very deeply. They've committed the Center of Wealth and Philanthropy to studying what makes philanthropy tick and what is the future of philanthropy, the Shervish and Haven studies. And you tie that together with people, not necessarily the top 50 donors in the Chronicle, but you look at why are people concerned? Well, when we looked at the end of 2012, in the fourth quarter, we looked at the fiscal cliff, that we had the presidential election, we had all of this concern, fear, angst, you know, what's the future hold? Forget about philanthropy for a second, but what's it hold as far as taxation, how much is a tax, and so on and so on. Well, we get by that, but we continue on with the concern that we have an increasing need, a demand for services that in the past and hopefully in the future nonprofits have provided to service this need. But we have this reduction, and I submit, and maybe I shouldn't go there, but I submit that we're having from the administration, both on the federal and state level, kind of a lessening of the importance of charity, to the extent that, and what I mean by that is to the extent that maybe the government can provide those services better than the charitable sector. I submit to you, apolitically and as objective as I can, the facts are that a voluntary tax in the form of philanthropy and gifting is more efficient by almost two times if I go an involuntary tax and have the government attempt to provide the same or similar services. So we do have concern in the future. The administration has said that 2012 at the end, the fiscal cliff was just the start of a tax, an increase in tax, and that we will no doubt have greater tax in the future. So stay tuned for that and the development and how that will affect philanthropy in the future. If we look at publications in your Sunday paper, you will see things like this. This came out of USA Weekend, I think, in the Hartford Courant Sunday ago. and Paul Newman's own. This is an annual recognition of volunteers, communities that recognize their volunteers, and we have 5 of the finalists. Tens of thousands of applications and recommendations are submitted every year, and 5 finalists and readers can vote for their winner, their number 1. And included in this is Westport, Connecticut, and for the 17th year, Westport is noted for promoting volunteerism in the community, and we thought we'd make a notation and recognize that also. From the gifting on a national basis, on a state basis, we look at vehicles. As I mentioned, this caller for this radio show asking how to start a donor advised fund. There are a number of ways of doing that, and a number of custodians of the donor advised fund. A lot of the gifts represented in the giving in 2012, we see a great increase of giving to local community foundations, and it's a staggering figure, and maybe in a future program we'll talk about that, and we'll ask the Hartford Foundation of Public Giving, one of their representatives, to come back. We had them several years ago, but there has been a dramatic increase in giving to local community foundations, and we'd like to talk about that. We're going from hundreds of millions to billions, and I think that's a significant factor when we look at the future of philanthropy. Well, we could go on with this boring subject of philanthropy, but we've got more in store for you in the future. And in closing, I'd like to ask you to just take out that checkbook and send a small check to Simsbury Community TV for the effort that they have local in the community, sharing with you volunteerism and activity and local government. So see you next time. Thanks for watching. Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.